I used to believe sleep was just a waste of time while everyone else rested. I wanted to produce, to play, to study, to live. But now, if I could turn back time, I'd trade everything, anything for just one deep, peaceful night of sleep.
Those were the words spoken by Lucas, a 16-year-old teenager sitting in a wheelchair with sunken eyes, trembling fingers, and hesitant speech when he started sleeping less than 3 hours a night. He had no idea that his brain was on the verge of a silent, progressive collapse. He didn't use drugs, had no obvious addictions, and suffered from no serious mental illness at first. But what began as an apparently productive habit, sleeping less to make the most of the day, ended up becoming an invisible sentence. And the scariest part, no one around him noticed until it was already too late. At first, Lucas was just another teenager fascinated by the idea of being exceptional, influenced by motivational videos that glorified extreme discipline. He believed that sleep was for the weak. He began reducing his sleep hours gradually from 8 to 6, then 5. Before he knew it, he was sleeping just 2 hours and 45 minutes a night, broken up into short naps throughout the day, all in the name of productivity. And for a while, it actually seemed like he was right. His grades were good, he stood out in sports, was active in online communities, and had even started learning programming on his own. But the human brain is a delicate machine, and any engine pushed beyond its limits will eventually break, even if the damage isn't visible at first. The first sign was subtle: memory lapses. Lucas would forget where he left simple items, like his phone or headphones. Then came more serious forgetfulness: passwords, exam dates, teachers' names. His performance declined. He became irritable and cried for no reason. His parents thought it was just stress. His friends said he was being dramatic, and he, out of pride, insisted everything was fine. Behind this seemingly functional appearance, Lucas's brain was in a state of emergency. Chronic sleep deprivation reduces neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to learn, adapt, and form new connections. Months later, medical scans would show a visible reduction in the synaptic density of the hippocampus, the brain region responsible for memory and emotional regulation. And the most terrifying part, that degeneration was already partially irreversible. But Lucas only sought medical help after a public collapse. He was presenting a school project when he fainted and suffered a seizure. When he woke up, he didn't recognize his own father. "I am Dr. Raphael, and this is just the first part of what happened to Lucas's brain." Lucas was hospitalized immediately after the collapse. At the hospital, doctors began a series of neurological exams. The results were alarming. His brain's electrical activity was profoundly altered. It was as if the regions responsible for attention, memory, and emotional regulation were operating in survival mode. He was diagnosed with multifactorial encephalopathy, a complex neurological condition that, in his case, was being intensified by severe and prolonged sleep deprivation. The most concerning part, this condition hadn't developed overnight. It had been silently building for over 2 years. In an adolescent's brain, sleep isn't just rest. It's the time when the brain consolidates memories, repairs neural tissue, strengthens synapses, and regulates essential hormones for development. By sleeping less than 3 hours a night, Lucas was blocking these vital functions. His cortisol levels, the stress hormone, were chronically elevated, while serotonin and dopamine, responsible for mood and motivation, had plummeted. He was entering a neurotoxic state. And the most tragic part? All of this could have been prevented by something as simple as sleep. While doctors tried to manage the symptoms with medications and therapy, the greatest challenge was psychological. Lucas had developed a toxic relationship with his own body. He took pride in enduring more than others, in beating sleep as if it were an obstacle. When he finally understood that his brain was imploding from the inside, guilt followed, and with guilt came depression. Gradually, he began experiencing parasomnias, sleep disorders that include intense nightmares, hallucinations upon waking, and involuntary movements. His speech became sluggish and his motor coordination began to fail. Even simple tasks like holding a glass of water required effort. Physical therapy became necessary? What started as a choice turned into a physical and mental prison. Tests showed that the connections between the prefrontal cortex and the limbic system were deteriorating. This meant Lucas had lost part of his ability to control impulses and emotions. He cried at TV commercials, became irritated by low noises, and sometimes laughed nervously without knowing why. His social life was affected too. Friends distanced themselves, believing he was just acting weird. Teachers saw him as a lost cause, and his parents, despite their love, didn't know how to deal with someone who seemed trapped in a young body with an elderly, exhausted brain. That's when he discovered the advanced neurological clinic where I work, and that's when the case landed in my hands. I'm Dr. Raphael, and what I found inside this teenager's brain made me reconsider everything I believed about human limits. And in the next part, I'll show you the most shocking details of what we discovered and why Lucas's case became an international warning about the dangers of chronic sleep deprivation. During that first clinical evaluation, what caught my attention was Lucas's gaze. It was a blank stare, but not apathetic. It was a look that silently cried for help. His speech was slow, almost disconnected from reality. I ordered a functional MRI scan of his brain, an exam that allows us to observe brain activity in real time while the patient performs simple cognitive tasks. What we saw left us in complete silence. The areas responsible for decision-making, such as the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, were nearly inactive, as if they had been shut down. Meanwhile, the limbic system, which governs emotions and instinctive reactions, was hyperactive. That explained why Lucas reacted so intensely to ordinary stimuli like lights, sounds, or even simple questions. He was at the mercy of his own brain, a brain that had been operating in a state of invisible collapse for 2 years. Chronic sleep deprivation had led to the accumulation of toxic proteins in his brain, such as beta amyloid, the same protein found in Alzheimer's patients. This didn't mean Lucas had dementia, but his brain was biologically aging far too fast. At just 17 years old, he showed brain patterns similar to someone over 60 with significant short-term memory deficits, motor difficulties, and cognitive slowing. We began an aggressive, yet carefully monitored, treatment plan. First, we reorganized his circadian rhythms through environmental control, natural light in the morning, complete darkness at night, no screens, no stimulation. We introduced melatonin, adjusted his meal times, and started daily sessions of non-invasive transcranial stimulation, a technique that applies mild electrical currents to reactivate dormant areas of the brain. During this process, Lucas went through crises. One night, he woke up screaming, convinced he was being suffocated. It was an episode of sleep paralysis, worsened by the prior sleep deprivation. On another occasion, he remained awake for 36 hours without noticing, trapped in obsessive thoughts as if reliving a trauma. It was like his brain was trying to defend itself, searching for patterns, even if chaotic ones. Gradually, he began to respond. His mood stabilized, his speech became more fluid, and he managed to sleep for 4 hours straight, something that hadn't happened in months. It may seem small, but it was a victory. Then 5 hours, then 6, and finally, a miracle, 7 continuous hours. The neuroplasticity of the young brain is powerful, but it demands patience, time, and consistency. Lucas had to relearn how to sleep and, with that, how to live. In the final phase of treatment, we administered a memory and logical reasoning test. He failed the first attempt. He cried. But unlike before, he didn't give up. On the second try, he completed the test with mistakes. On the third, nearly perfect. And in that moment, for the first time, I saw hope in his eyes. This case isn't just about a teenager who didn't sleep. It's about a generation that believes sleep is a waste of time, that productivity is more important than health. That has become used to 3 a.m. notifications and blue light burning into their retinas at night. The human brain wasn't built for this. And when you ignore that for too long, it will come at a cost with interest you can't afford. In the next chapter, I'll tell you what happened to Lucas 1 year later and why his case became one of the most important neurological warnings in modern medicine. 1 year after starting treatment, Lucas returned to the office. He was different. Still thin, still with dark circles under his eyes, but there was light in his eyes. He greeted me with a shy but genuine smile. He sat across from me, no longer with that lost look from before. In his hands, he held a notebook where he had written, by hand, a complete account of his recovery. It was the first time in 2 years that he had been able to focus on something for more than 10 consecutive minutes. Neurologically, the exams showed impressive signs of recovery. The connections in his prefrontal cortex had begun to reestablish. The functional MRI revealed increased activity in areas related to attention, memory, and reasoning. His brain was slowly regenerating, but there were scars. Lucas had developed a type of chronic sensory hypersensitivity. Loud noises bothered him, and intense lights made him dizzy. He also needed an extremely controlled routine to keep his sleep pattern stable. Small changes, like going to bed just an hour later, could trigger days of mental fatigue and memory lapses. He will never be the same again, but he is alive and aware, and most importantly, he is truly awake, not just with his eyes open, but with his mind present. Few people understand the cost of living in a state of permanent exhaustion. Chronic sleep deprivation isn't just a bad choice. It's a slow and silent form of self-destruction. The human brain needs sleep just as it needs oxygen. Without it, there is no learning, no memory, no self-control. Everything that makes us human is gradually corroded without us realizing it. During treatment, Lucas wrote a sentence on a loose sheet of paper that I still keep in my office. I thought the world needed me to be awake, but in truth, it only needed me to be well. This story isn't just about one patient. It's about you. It's about all of us. We live in an age where sleep has become a luxury and rest is seen as weakness. But there is nothing more revolutionary than taking care of yourself. Your brain is not replaceable. Your body may resist for a while, but eventually it will collect its debt. And sometimes when it does, there's no turning back. I'm Dr. Raphael, and after following dozens of cases like Lucas's, I can say with conviction, never underestimate the power of a good night's sleep. Never assume you can make up for it later. Sometimes later never comes. If you're constantly tired, irritable, unfocused, struggling with poor memory, the problem might not be a lack of discipline. It might be sleep. And maybe it's time to change. Because between the time you save by staying awake and the time you lose trying to heal, the math never adds up.